Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I drop my kid off at school and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Good morning, faithful listeners. It is Monday, March 11th, and I am walking home on a cloudy, wintry day. The sun is not shining here in suburban Illinois, suburban Chicago, but the weather's a little bit nicer anyway. It's supposed to be in the high in the 40s or 50s today. It's supposed to get into the 60s by midweek. Should be a good week for spring to emerge finally. So that's your daily weather report here on Pick Up and Deliver. I had a couple different ideas for what I might talk to you about today, both of them based around my experiences gaming this weekend. The subject I'm not going to do had to do with 5 and 6 player gaming. I think I will talk about that another day. Instead, I thought what I would talk about today are escape room games. Now, I've certainly explored this subject a little bit on the podcast before, but having played 2 escape room games in the last 4 days, I thought it would be interesting to revisit them along with my memories of the different escape room systems. For those of you who have never played one before, to kind of get an idea of what the different game systems are and how they play. I think what I'm going to do is start with the easiest system I know and work my way up to the hardest. So as we're talking through this, I'll talk about how the different games play in the ones that I played. I'm not going to use any specifics because I don't want to spoil anything. So, to begin with the easiest escape room games I played. So first off, what the heck is an escape room game? Escape room games are games made to be played one time by a particular group of people. They generally have a fairly low price point because they're not replayable, or because a single group couldn't replay them. And generally they're set around the idea of being stuck somewhere and having to solve puzzles to get out. Now this differs from a campaign game, something like Time Stories, where the story you only would play it once because as you're playing you reveal parts of the story and you solve puzzles that way. And I'd say the games are tangentially related. If you draw a Venn diagram around the different categories of tabletop gaming and what you're doing, that campaign games like Time Stories overlap, or like Detective or those sorts of games overlap heavily with escape room games. But escape room games are their own brand of thing. So a couple other aspects of them. Often they are app supported, not always, but often. They usually have a little story, but generally not much. And it's very rare for the story to influence the experience at all. In a game like Time Stories, you're making narrative choices, and the results spring from those narrative choices. In escape room games, it's very rarely a narrative choice that you would make to solve the game. It's more puzzle solving. So, I'm going to talk through, as I think about it, 5 different escape room board games that I've played, and talk about the merits of each as I remember them. Just to be clear, this weekend I played one of the Exit the Game sets and one set of Unlock. So those are the 2 that I've played most recently, and frankly the 2 that I've played most often. The other 3 I've played between 1 and 3 scenarios, and so I have a passing understanding of them, but not as intense a understanding. So I would say the easiest escape room game, if you wanted to start off and you wanted one that was pretty simple to solve, I would say there is a series called Escape the Room. I think that's the series. They have 2 of them. There's the Stargazer's Manor and another one, something Castle. Both of these are aimed at being more mainstream accessible. They're available at Target. The Escape from Stargazer's Manor one we got from Target. And I would say they are, with gentle use, reusable. And the reusable category I'm going to include here because some of the escape room games are intended that after you play them, you can put them back in the box and they're fully ready to play again. Other escape room games are intended for you to play them once and be done with them and not be able to play them again. And some of those escape room games are something where you can play them in a way that you don't have to reuse them, but it's harder. It takes some work. So I'm going to talk about reusability between completely reusable and never reusable. And I'm not talking here about the same group playing them again, because none of these would be fun to play a second time if you've already played them, because it's all puzzle solving. So you would remember the solution to the puzzles. But, all right, so I think it's called Escape the Room. Escape from Stargazer's Manor. This is a escape room game with little envelopes of things that you open up to play, and the game will instruct you to open different envelopes at different parts. As I recall, the game bits often have a physical component you need to manipulate, so it'll be a couple little things that you're trying to hook together or overlap in such a way that you're gonna find how they fit together as part of your experience and go from there. Whereas, so that's how the game plays. It's often physical puzzles that involve manipulating physical components. The challenge of these was relatively low, but I would also say the ideal player count has to be very low. We played with 4 or 5, and a lot of us just sat around while we would take turns working on the puzzles, or maybe we'd have 2 puzzles to work on at once, and it would be different people working on them. But it was very rare for everyone to feel involved, because there's just not enough to do. And I would say that's a downside of most of these games. They often advertise you could play 4 or more. I find they're most fun with 2 or 3, and that's true for every one of these games, in my opinion. Just because usually there's not enough to do if you have 5 people, 6 people, which we've tried before, and we end up not having fun. But, so the Search for Stargazer's Manor, that series, I would put it, they're fun, but they're pretty easy. The next level up in terms of difficulty, I would say, I can't remember what these ones are called. They might also be Escape Room the game. Yeah, they're Escape Room the game. As opposed to Escape the Room, Stargaze Manor, these are Escape Room the game. These come in a fairly large box, and you get 4 scenarios in one box. They come with a electronic doodad. It's like a small box, maybe 6 inches wide by 4 inches high by 4 inches deep, and it's got various bits of code or other elements written on the sides of the box. Comes with a variety of plastic keys that are all these weird shapes. And when you're solving the puzzles, you have to figure out which key to put into the lock. It's got 4 lock holes. So you put in the 4 keys, and then you push a button, and it either makes a bump sound and you lose a minute, or a bing sound and you get to move on to the next puzzle. This game has a fun toy factor. The puzzles are interesting, although again, you generally don't have more than 1 puzzle to work on, and often it's small components that are hard to share. The toy factor of it is fun, as is the timing element. So ultimately, that's a pretty good one as well. This is pretty reusable. There's no components destroyed. You can put the stuff back in the envelopes when you're finished, although it does take a little bit of work. You have to tear the envelopes open. So if you're not careful, you could make it so it's pretty hard to put back. But that's Escape Room the game. Again, available mass market things. I would say the second most difficult, or second easiest. right, of the 5 I'm going to talk about, the middle level is the MacGyver game. This feels very similar to Escape the Room, Stargazer's Manor, or the other one. The puzzles are drawn from the TV show. I distinctly remember an episode of MacGyver where he had to use chocolate in a chemical reaction in some way, and that's one of the things you have to do. So if you're a MacGyver fan, this game rewards that enjoyment with touches of nostalgia, although it does not depend on you understanding the show or remembering the show to solve the puzzle. The puzzles are all pretty straightforward in what you have to do. You just have to work out how to do it. But we did run into some trouble. We did have to take a few clues, as I recall. And so I would put this in the middle on difficulty. I guess I found this one a little bit more enjoyable at 4. To be clear, most of these games I've played at 4 or 5. We tend to play them with the family. And so often I'm feeling like, oh, we just haven't we have too many people here. The MacGyver one felt better about that than some of the others, as I recall. But I've only played one of these, so I can't speak to the whole box. That said, you get 5 adventures in the box, I believe, and you're supposed to do them sequentially. I don't recall destroying anything, so I think you could redo the adventure, but I'm not going to stake my reputation on the reusability there. MacGyver is fine. I would say the third up in level of difficulty. I would say I like the Escape Room, the game, the one with the little plastic keys, better than the MacGyver game. But I like both of those better than the Escape Room Stargazer's Manor game. So that hopefully gives you a sense of the ratings as well. Then the last 2 games I'll talk about, I like both of these better than the other 3. The next one up in the level of difficulty, I would say, is the series called Unlock. Although because this is a series of one-off games, or I believe if you're in Europe, you buy them 3 at a time in group sets. These games are my favorite of the series. I find these the most enjoyable. I find the puzzles the right level of difficulty. There are occasionally ones where you see the answer and you're like, well, that's ridiculous or something, but I don't find myself doing that as much as I do with the Exit games. In America, these games come in single adventures in a box. They are completely reusable, which is nice because then you can swap with other people, or if you have a game club, you can donate them after you play them, and then other people can play them at the game club with no harm coming to them. They are app-driven, which I would say is the one downside. If you like a game that's self-contained, you can't play the Unlock games without the app. The app drives the puzzle-solving mechanism for a number of the things. Unlock also uses this clever system where when you're getting cards, they have one of 4 colors. They're either gray, which makes them like a sort of scenery. They're green, which makes them a machine you can interact with. They are blue, which makes them keys, and they're red, which makes them locks, or vice versa. So the way the game works is every card, it's just a deck of cards, and every card is numbered. And the machines, you punch the number into the app, and it will give you something to do. There's also yellow ones, which are 4-digit codes, and you have to figure out the 4-digit code in some way. Or the blue and green ones are keys and locks, and the way that works is you add them together. So let's say you have a 12 card and a 20 card that you think go together, then you pull the 32 card and look at it. And if it's the answer, it'll tell you the answer. Sometimes it'll add another step to double check if it's the answer. Otherwise, sometimes it'll just give you like an X and say, wrong. Hit the penalty button on the app, and then you lose a minute or whatever. The codes you punch into the app, the machines, often you have to interact with the app in some way. But these puzzles generally are pretty interesting. They're generally pretty spread out, so at the beginning of the game, you get a book of things, like a pamphlet with a bunch of things on it, and then you'll get a bunch of cards, and you don't really know which card goes to which puzzle, and you don't know what order you're going to do them in. So there's some creative thinking going on there. It comes with a robust hint system, so if you need a hint, you can hit a button and it'll give you a hint. which works pretty well. Generally, I find the unlock games the most satisfying. I've played maybe 5 or 6 of them. As with all of these, if you're playing in a group of 5, it does feel a little limiting in terms of contributing to the puzzle. But even then, often the puzzle is something you can kind of speak about, so you could talk about strategies for solving it, even if you aren't looking at the thing directly. So that's the Unlock series. I highly recommend those. And then finally, Exit the Game. Exit the Game are the most interesting as puzzles. They bring in the most diverse sets of approaches, in part because they are made to be ruined. They come with a fairly large booklet that has things in it where sometimes you're folding things, sometimes you're cutting things, sometimes you're drawing in things, and these elements allow you to engage with the puzzle in ways you couldn't otherwise. It uses a series of cards to tell you the answers, which works well. And overall, it's a great system. The puzzles I find are often too difficult. There have been a number of times where we just had to look up the answer because we couldn't figure out the puzzle. And that can be frustrating, especially if you think the answer is dumb. But overall, both the... and you can only play the exit games once, and unless you're very careful, you can't give them to someone else or reuse them. That said, they're like $15, so it's not outrageous that you would spend that money and not get it back. So I'm home. That took longer than I thought, but what is your experience with these escape room games? I'm curious, which series is your favorite? Are there ones I have missed that I should try? Let me know. I didn't even talk about Deckscape. Oh my goodness, there's a whole other series called Deckscape. I'll try to mention that in another podcast. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.